Welcome to Wellness is a Way of Life, the podcast for female leaders seeking sustainable energy, clarity, and confidence. I'm Megan Swan, your guide on a journey to mastering wellness as an integrated part of your life. Let's explore personalized wellness strategies that truly resonate with who you are. Welcome back to Wellness is a Way of Life. Today, I'm chatting with Alison Cohen. She and I met through Saha Collective. We'll be having Alenka, the founder of Saha, on the podcast in a few weeks, but I really resonated with her story. She's an expert in holistic health and a life coach, particularly passionate about helping individuals reconnect their authentic selves to cultivate balance, well-being, and fulfillment, drawing from her personal journey of healing from burnout, disordered eating, and chronic pain. Alison now empowers clients to overcome emotional blocks, align with their core values, and create lives of harmony and vitality. I love that you also really hone in on this spirituality piece. So I'm excited to dive in. Let's start with, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for asking. I don't usually get the question back. It's Monday, but everything's ticking along. I can't complain. It feels like a productive day so far. I'd love to know for you, I don't know how much you want to dive into your burnout story, but what were some of the early signs that you maybe ignored that you help your clients currently like tune into or mark as red flags that maybe aren't as logical or talked about?
Of course, yeah. And I'm really an open book, so happy to talk about anything. For me, it was really quickly that I was able to notice that I was burning out. I would say that in the job that I was in, it was very high intensity, a lot of hours. And I want to say within 2 months, I could tell that it wasn't sustainable. Within the first couple of weeks, I could probably tell that it wasn't sustainable. I'm someone who is very sensitive, like physically, and just can notice that shift really quickly. And I think that for me, having been through in college, I struggled with IBS. So I sort of had that experience of like being in a new environment, feeling what it feels like when something doesn't feel right in your body, and then seeing the consequences of what happens when you don't listen to your body and how that can really become somewhat traumatic in a lot of ways. And just was very sensitive to like noticing those small shifts within myself. And I think that for me, the biggest one that first sort of started to show up was just fatigue. I would just wake up exhausted, like truly like just that, like almost that weight on you of feeling like, how am I going to be able to get through the day? How am I going to be able to get through the week? Like, am I going to have enough energy in my body to sustain me? Something else that I began to notice really early on, and this really ties into that, is I actually would, when I would get home from work, engage in emotional eating, sort of binge type behaviors, because it was like I felt so depleted energetically. Like my life just lacked so much joy and fulfillment in a lot of ways. I was trying to get that. Like when I would get home, I was like, how do I get that feeling back into my body? And for me, it was through food. So I noticed that really quickly as well. And then I would say about 4 or 5 months in is when it became really apparent to me. And this is probably the more when people typically are like, oh, okay, something's wrong. But I started to break out an eczema on my cheeks. It would be every single Thursday, which was obviously like the point where my body would just sort of shut down in terms of like how much capacity it had to, take on everything that it was taking on in terms of stress. And so every Thursday, my cheeks would I get really hot in the face. My cheeks would break out in eczema. It would last throughout the weekend. And then it would sort of reset around Monday or Tuesday. And so I really had like the physical symptoms of it. But I think that, for clients and for people who are really struggling with burnout and understanding, like, do I even have burnout? What to look out for? I definitely think like, what are your energy levels like? How do you feel on a day-to-day basis? Something that's really like a telltale sign is just when you get to the weekend, like, how do you feel? Are you able to go out on a Friday night? Like, could you go to dinner with your friends or your family? Are you able to be social? If you're withdrawing socially, that's an indication like you don't have enough energy to really be giving to others in any sort of way. It's really like, what are those small shifts that you're seeing about the way that you're able to show up outside of work and how much energy you're able to give outside of work that can be really indicative of like, okay, how much energy am I giving inside of work, and is this too much?
So many points I wanted to drill down on there. But I love how you painted that picture. And so just to round it out, like what was the overall timeline between like I'm not aligned with this and like you actually getting out of it?
I ended up staying for a year and 7 months. So I, yeah,
And you
I,
2 or 3 months in, that's so telling, you know?
yeah, it was my first job out of college, and there's a lot of pressure I feel on, especially your first job, to stay a certain amount of time to make it seem like, you're a hard worker and like other people would want to, hire you. And there was a lot of pressure on me in that way. And also just you don't have any sort of savings yet, anything like that. And for me too, like the job I ended up going into, it was a private banking role. So sort of like a financial advisor type role. And my dad was a financial advisor. And so like in college, I studied economics. In high school, I kind of had the idea that I wanted to be a financial advisor. And so for me, it was like I knew I needed to leave physically, but mentally, I really needed to feel like I had sort of checked off the box fully and like gave it my all so that I could move on from it, if that makes sense. Like I wanted to be like, I really tried to make this work because I like that's what I really thought I'd be doing for the rest of my life for the prior 5 to 10 years. And so I really like went into it and like sort of left it wanting to be able to say like I gave it my all and I can fully kind of lay that to rest and follow whatever comes next in my career path. So it was more of like mentally I wasn't ready to let go of it yet.
I'm reading Kids These Days right now. I'm trying to find the author. I can't remember. We'll post it in the show notes. But if you haven't already read it, it's kind of speaking really to that point in terms of it's specifically about millennials, but just how that the crunch is like how much pressure there is in at every stage of kids' lives these days. And then particularly you get that first job. So you've really like managed to check this box that increasingly so many that are technically prepared for it don't even get the chance. And then so it's just like layer upon layer of pressure going on there that tells you should stick it out and not honor the very clear mental, physical, emotional, spiritual signals that your body and mind are giving you. So yeah, I think it's just so important to call that out, that it's completely different than like when our parents were in their same first job.
Yeah.
Okay, so you got out. What was like, let's unwind. Like what did you first start doing and how long? Because I think this is another kind of misconception with burnout that like you just take away. First of all, I love how we didn't really get into like what the environment was other than just overwhelm and like capacity and an amount of tasks. But, when we're talking about burnout, it's not like another kale salad and a yoga routine are going to solve that sort of issue. It's a structural problem. You're in an environment that you no amount of wellness tools is going to solve. You need to decide and prioritize yourself enough to get yourself out of that environment. So walk us through that bit. What was was there like a last moment kind of thing, or was there you saw like an easier out at some point? What was the last straw, so to speak?
Yeah, yeah. It's a definitely an interesting story. And to your point, just about there are some environments where it doesn't matter what you do in it, but you're never going to be healthy. Like I would wake up every morning and work out. I would eat a salad every single day for lunch. Like I would meditate on the weekends. Like I was doing everything right. And you can't sort of out habit or, implement anything at a fast enough rate to sort of offset the toxicity of an environment that really isn't serving you. And I think that that's really important for a lot of people to hear too, because there is that perception like you're just not doing the right things. And sometimes that could be true. Like if you aren't exercising at all, you aren't eating right, you aren't taking any time for yourself intentionally, like you're just scrolling on TikTok every night when you get home. Like, yeah, there are some things you can implement, but for a lot of people, like just knowing and not feeling ashamed of the fact like you like there are certain environments where you just cannot sustain it based on who you are and the fact that it doesn't align with you. But so for me, I basically, when I first started burning out, like 2 months in, I had a meeting with my coach. I worked with a coach at the time, and we sort of came to the decision that I should stay for a year. Like that was sort of the time frame I gave myself to see, just to, again, like really ensure that I gave it my all and was ready to leave. And so that was like what I'd sort of set in my mind. And the thing, it's like a toxic relationship. I mean, the longer you stay in it, the harder it is to get out. And so I got to that year mark and I like knew I didn't want to be there anymore. I was applying to other roles within the company in different locations because I was trying to convince myself, oh, if I'm in a warmer location where like New York
I
City.
have a palm tree outside of my window.
Yeah.
Maybe somehow easier to digest this.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So I had like done all of that, and basically, I mean, this is really a crazy story. So my roommate at the time was moving out of the city, and so I was like, okay, I need to find a new apartment. I'm going to just stay at this job. I don't know what to do. Like, I'll figure it out once I get a new apartment in the city. So I'm like looking for apartments. There was nothing. There were no good options. Everything was super expensive. And we had a really great deal in our apartment. So I ended up deciding I'm just going to re-up this apartment and hopefully find somebody to sublet from me. And so on the day that I was bringing in my lease agreement into the office to fax it to like re-sign the apartment for another year, I ended up getting mugged like right outside my apartment. Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And so that was for me like the sign that I needed of like I wasn't stepping in for myself in the way that I needed. Like I wasn't the universe. I believe sort of knew that like I wasn't going to do what I needed to do. And so that just really woke me up because for me, just having that experience, it really kind of broke a lot of the illusions that I had. For me, money is something that provides a lot of safety. Like I have a lot of mindset stuff tied to money, and it was like money and all this great job and all this stuff, like nothing could protect me in that situation. Like it was just me that could protect me, and it really broke sort of like that illusion of all these things that I was doing to like keep myself quote unquote safe by being in sort of like the golden handcuffs, which is exactly what it is. It's kind of like you give them a certain amount for a certain amount of safety and protection and stability in your life, and it sort of broke that illusion for me. And I was like, okay, you know what? Like I have to save myself. Like I have to stop relying on this company, on these people to do for me, like what I need to actually be doing for myself. And so that was like the big turning point. And I ended up moving back home because I live like 45 minutes outside of New York City. That's where I grew up. So I would commute into the office, and I stayed for another 6 months, but was like, I was like, no, like I'm going to leave. Like I knew I was going to leave. I just was deciding on exactly what that next step was. And then on top of that fall, like a couple of months later, we had someone come in under me, and she relieved a lot of the pressure that was on me in a lot of ways. And it was really, really helpful. And so it was kind of like a breath of fresh air. And she, about a month in, ended up getting moved out from under me again. And something else happened structurally where basically I was like the only analyst under like 2 or 3 bankers. So like just the workload was crazy. And I actually went to like the manager at the time and was like, if I don't get other people under me and like helping me and supporting me by the end of the year, I'm going to leave. And they actually didn't believe me. Like they were like, we can't do much. And they were like, okay, yeah, like we'll see what we can do. But you could just tell like it wasn't a priority. And so nothing ended up, like I never got any support by the end of the year. And so I ended up, that was like also kind of just a thing that was like, I like on top of my own personal experience, it was like them not prioritizing me yet again. And like hearing me try to voice what I needed to stay was what eventually led me to leave.
Yeah. Just like the universe smacking you over the head multiple times. Like,
yeah.
So what was like the first key thing? Okay, so we painted that picture, and so how important it is that you removed yourself from that situation. So obviously that's like step 1, but it's not like a week later you feel fantastic.
Yeah, no, it took, I would say probably 6+ months to really fully heal from burnout, and just even like physically, like you can see in pictures, just like I had a lot more acne and I had the eczema flare-ups, and just like the level of inflammation in my face was really like, just the difference between that was really insane. I guess a lot of people call it sort of like cortisol face, or like sort of like the stress of that. And yeah, it took a lot of really slowing down and addressing what was creating so much stress in my life. And I think that one of the big things that was creating a lot of the stress in that role was like, I tend to sort of play the fixer role in a lot of, and the pleaser in a lot of situations in my life, and just taking on the emotional burden, I think, of everybody else and trying to fix everybody else's problems. And so one of the big things that I did was really work on my mindset and work on the ways that I was showing up in that role in other areas of my life, and beginning to really sort of like reclaim my power and my ability and desire to take care of myself first, and trust that that sort of allows me to show up better for others. Obviously, like eating in a way that's really detoxing your system. I think that a lot of people sort of think of the word detox and they think of, oh, I need to go on like a juice cleanse or something like that. But you can be consistently detoxing by just implementing a lot of servings of fruits and vegetables, and focusing on the right foods, and just not eating processed food, stuff that has all these additives in it. Like, you can be consistently detoxing your system, and your cells are always regenerating and renewing. And after a certain number of months, like the new cells that are in your body will sort of reflect what you've been putting into them for the past couple of months. And so it's like, how do you keep feeding your cells the things that they need to really be at their best? And so really, I mean, the thing with me is, because of my gut issues previously, like I've always eaten really healthy. So I just really kind of stayed consistent with that, but it just took a certain amount of time for me to be out of that environment for those cells to really reflect that. And, obviously incorporating things like mindfulness, meditation, getting outside, going on walks. But for me, it was all really like, there were physical things I could do, but I was doing all of the right physical things while I was at the job. And for me, it was really just like, how do I slow down and get myself back in a space where I'm no longer living in survival mode, that fight or flight, and can really sort of like trust that I'm safe and not everything is like a fire drill. And it took a lot of time just being in an environment that was actually supportive of that. And I think luckily for me too was the fact that I had gone home and I had actually asked for support from the people that I love to sort of support me during that time. And I think that like connection is such a big piece of us being able to regulate our nervous systems, especially co-regulating with somebody who has a more regulated nervous system than we do, is a great way to actually regulate. And so I think that just being around people that I loved and who were willing to support me in that time after having just been through so much was a really, really big part of it. And it was just doing all those small things, of course, to regulate. But at the end of the day, it was really a mental, emotional thing. And I continued to work with a coach and just address a lot of that as well. And so it's really different for every client, because it just depends on, like how much of the physical stuff are you doing? How much of the emotional stuff have you been doing? And like how much when, I speak with them and we sort of determine like what is sort of the core factors that are contributing to their burnout, like what are those things that we need to be focusing on to make sure that you're feeling safe in your body again. Because at the end of the day, that's really what it is like, do you feel safe in your body? And that's going to be different for everybody.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're completely aligned on the detox thing. Essentially you can be supporting the natural intelligence of your body all day, maybe not all day, but every day with something, more fruits and vegetables. Yeah. Love that you called that out. And I'd love if we could talk a little bit more specifically about the skin reaction, because I think that that's a symptom that not maybe everyone would consider related per se to burnout or even stress. And it's something I see quite a bit with clients as well, particularly women. And I don't know, do you know, is there something specific to women that it's often on the face? And at least the men in my world and my family and close, it tends to be, in sort of more easy to hide places. Not that that's necessarily a good thing, but I was curious if you had any insight on that.
Yeah, I mean, my assumption would be mostly because of hormonal imbalance. Men's cycles reset every 24 hours. So, they have a stressful day at work and then they wake up the next day and their system has reset. And so there's less of an impact on their hormones typically from stressors versus a woman. It's a 28-day cycle. So whatever happened to you yesterday, you're taking in with you for the next 28 days, essentially, or it's having some sort of impact. And, a big thing that has been coming up for a lot of women is, especially in the early 20s, is having a lot of hormonal acne. I know that that's like a big pain point for a lot of women. And in terms of balancing your hormones, like one of the key things that you need to be focusing on is reducing the amount of stress. When you have chronic stress, it impacts, your hormones and how balanced they are, and also like how regular your periods are. And there's typically a big correlation between like burnout and having irregular periods. And so my assumption would be that a lot of that is tied to hormones. Eczema can also be tied to hormone imbalance as well. It's also, your skin is like your biggest detox organ. So, if you're not able to detox on a regular basis and your body's just so clogged with all these toxins, whether it's like physical toxins or emotional toxins. I also believe like stressors really is what an emotional quote unquote toxin is. You're going to see that, you're going to feel that. And I tie a lot of the work I do is really about tying the physical symptoms that you're experiencing to what's happening within you emotionally. And something that is really interesting that I have had a lot of other women experience is that feeling of when they're being really stressed, of like feeling really hot in their cheeks. And so that was something that I was experiencing a lot of when I was stressed or like really flustered of just like how much stuff was going on in my day to day and not being able to tackle it and not knowing what to do next. And just again, like a lot of that stress, I would feel it in my cheeks, like they would get hot. And interestingly, that's where the eczema ended up sort of being on my face. And so for me, I really believe it was an emotional root. And it was like that was sort of just the physical manifestation of it. But I also think it's probably deeply tied to the likelihood that if you're struggling with burnout, you're struggling with hormone imbalance as well.
I would love, so now that you're in, you're running your own business and you're a founder of sorts, what's one boundary that every female founder should have to you as like as a basic foundation?
That's a great question. I think really having at least 2 days that 1 to 2 days, depending on where you are sort of in your business, that you don't work at all. And I've said this before, but I actually sort of believe in some ways that is where, the corporate setting has gotten it right, of like having days where you truly are off. And that just allows your body to reset. Like I do think the 2 consecutive days helps your body reset. So when you get into a Monday, it's like, okay, like I feel energized. I feel ready to go. I know that, being an entrepreneur, being a founder, it's not always that easy. And for me, especially like being able to pick and choose what days, maybe it's like for some reason you don't have a lot going on a Wednesday. Okay, like maybe you designate that day to being the day that you have off. But really, like, can you take one full day off where you're just like, you unplug and you try to just not deal with work as much as possible, because your body does just need that time to reset every single week.
Yeah, I love you to call that out. Like for me, it's Sundays and if I can, Saturdays. But I think that's one of the beauties of entrepreneurship, that it doesn't necessarily have to be the traditional weekend. And a lot of clients of mine have found, that they love to take Fridays because like not the whole world is taking that day per se, or they take like the last half of Friday. So what for you, like what's this key connecting where you started prioritizing your own well-being and feeling like, it really improved your own professional ability, impact?
Yeah, so this goes back like a little bit in my story, but so basically I started struggling with IBS my freshman year of college. And I did all the right physical things, very similar. Like I was doing diet, supplements, all of that. And like I saw improvement, of course. But I sort of hit a wall after about a year or so. And then my senior year, I had a couple of personal things. Again, it was like a personal situation that sort of came up, and I just sort of hit a rock bottom mentally at that point. I was struggling with disordered eating. My IBS was still flaring up and other stuff. Sort of all that combined was just too much. And so I ended up working with a spiritual coach at the time and doing that work with her and actually addressing the mental, emotional, like I never worked with a therapist before. I'd never really addressed and really gone inward and been like, what's going on within me, and having that experience and really, looking at the ways that I was being really, really hard on myself, that harsh inner critic, perfectionism, people pleasing, victim mindset, like you name it. Like the thoughts that were going on in my mind were not very conducive to self-love and compassion. Exactly. There was no compassion there whatsoever. It was very like drill sergeant. And working with her and just seeing the shift in just who I was as a person within a couple of months was one of the most, like even to this day, one of the most amazing experiences I've ever had, of just seeing how shifting your mindset and shifting almost like your inner landscape and what you can access within you, whether it's love, abundance, peace, really coming back to my own power and realizing like all of that existed within me, and that I was the one that was blocking that from myself by being so hard on myself, by putting so much pressure on myself, thinking that I was going to get those things externally when I got a certain job or I got a guy to like me or some silly thing like that. And so that experience is when I really became really passionate about this space, especially like the mental, emotional aspect of holistic health, because like just everything changed in my life. I used to look outside myself for validation consistently, like with everything that I did, and just being able to make decisions for myself and be confident in them and show up confidently in a space, no matter who was there, and really trust my own inner wisdom and what was calling me. Like I never ever would have had the guts to leave the job that I had if I hadn't done so much personal development previously, or ever have had the guts to start my own business in the wellness space if I hadn't done all of that work before even getting into corporate, if I'm going to be honest. And so that experience is really what changed everything for me in terms of like really focusing on taking care of myself. But I guess other than that, and like prior to that, was just having gone through a lot of chronic health issues and experiencing the pain that does come with that. That was when I first began like taking care of my body physically. But for me, like the real shift happened when I started to address the mental, emotional roots of things.
I love that answer. So in your opinion, like what's the relationship between authenticity and sustainable success?
That's a great question. I feel like everything. I feel like authenticity is the answer to everything. And that's why I love the work that I do, is because what I'm really helping you do is explore who it is that you are and get to know yourself better. And that's where mindfulness is so important, because it's like, having done so much of the inner work myself now, it's like I forget, but so many people are just going through life just making decisions based on what they think they should do or what others are expecting of them. And that creates that pattern where you're always looking for more because nothing ever feels right. Like if you're always looking for external validation, there's always going to be more that you can do and more validation that you can get. And so that just that is in a lot of ways what leads to burnout, because you're just like, I need the next thing, I need the next thing, I need the next thing. And how do I work harder and harder and harder to get there? And when you can slow down and really get curious about who it is that you are and what it is that really fulfills you, like what your core values are, what lights you up, what makes you feel good in your body, you actually get to feel like satiated by the stuff that you're doing. And that gives you the permission to be like, okay, you know what? I could take a break. I can take care of myself. I can just enjoy where I am in this present moment. And to me too, it's like that energy is what attracts so much. Like there are so many times where like I would be, speaking about a certain investment vehicle or something like that. And you could just tell like by the way that I was speaking, like it just wasn't convincing. Like no one would want to buy that from me. Like, and then, and then I talk about my wellness journey and the work that I do with clients. And it's just like the energy and the confidence that I have in it. and the excitement that I have for it that makes people be like, I want that. Like, I remember people coming up to me after I'd, gone through this whole personal development journey and being like, your entire energy is shifted. Like, what did you do? And it's just like that energy that you get to embody when you come back to your true self, when you start learning how to show yourself love and compassion, and you learn how to show up confidently as yourself, not trying to imitate somebody else or do what somebody's expecting of you. It's like, that is just the energy that creates sustainable success, because it feels good to you so you can keep showing up. And it really is sort of like that. I don't want to use like I feel like it's a buzzer, but like almost like that magnetic energy of just like people naturally want to have what you're having because you're happy, you're enjoying life, you're feeling fulfilled by what you do.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like people, like energy speaks volumes, beyond and beyond. Well, I really enjoyed this conversation. Where should people come find you?
Yeah, it was so amazing speaking with you. And if you want to come find me, I'm on Instagram at transform with an E at the end _coaching. And then you could also find me at www.transform with an E at the end -coaching.com. And I'm sure that'll be in the show notes. I'm assuming
sure, in the show notes.
Okay. Okay, awesome. I always have a hard time. Like, I'm like, do people understand it when I spell it that way? But I'm sure they can find it in the show notes.
It's all good. Any sort of last parting words or like the vibe that you're going into 2025 with?
I think that this year is a really big year where people are going to start to really realize the connection between physical health and emotional mental health. Like, I really see that being a core focus of this year. I feel like, there's wellness is so up and coming right now. Like everyone's talking about wellness, but I think there's going to be a lot more emphasis on just like the impact of mindfulness and mental health. And I think that, something I say to everyone is just like, ask for support. If you need, like, support is the thing that has saved me when I was burnt out. It's the thing that continues to save me and support me as I create a business, which isn't easy. It's the thing that, it saved me when I was struggling with disordered eating and IBS. Like, connection and support is really the key to so much of mental, emotional health, and therefore physical health. And so I encourage anyone listening to this who maybe has been reluctant to ask for help to just be open to it, whether it is from like a coach or a therapist, or even if it's just from a family member. Like, it's so important to advocate for yourself and ask for what you need.
Incredible message. Excellent. Love it. Well, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. Thanks for tuning in to Wellness is a Way of Life. Are you ready to make wellness a natural part of your routine? Let's stay connected. Go to meganswanwellness.com. Until next time, live well and thrive.